All right, so I want to do a quick tutorial of how I made this using morphin. There's a few things going on, but it's all pretty easy to set up. So I've got a shadow caster, I've got a backdrop, I've got some post-processing, and I've got a rig with a few different things going on in it. A lot of the motion here, it's actually driven by a single joint rotation, and a lot of the extra stuff is coming out of constraints. I can show that if I turn off constraints, you can see that actually all the motion, it's just from me wiggling this character's hips, and all the rest in terms of keeping the feet locked to the ground, the tail wiggling, the head wiggling are all from constraints, especially the new springy constraints, which are really cool. Anyway, let's see how I did this from scratch. So I'm going to go make a new project. Yep. And I'm going to import the dinosaur. So I sculpted this guy in Nomad. It's based on a design from, I think, a Crash Bandicoot game. It's really cool. I forget the artist name, but it's an awesome design. I was really pleased with it. So I'm going to just increase the lighting of the environment just to get a bit of shading. And I'm going to go to a side view and go to my orthographic camera for a sec, just so I can drop him to the floor and center him. So that's about right. Go back into perspective camera, and let's first of all make a rig. So I'm going to go up to the make new objects section, which is this menu here, and I'm going to go make a rig. Okay, so I'm going to use this bone as a sort of combined hips and spine. So I'm going to move it back to roughly where the spine should start, so where his pelvis would be, and I'm going to rotate it forward to point towards his neck, like that. A little bit higher. Cool. I'm going to make a child bone by clicking this child bone button, and that can be the head bone. And I'll scale it back using the purple handle here. And I'm going to make another child bone of this one to represent a jaw. I don't really need it for this test, but I like to make it. So I'm going to make a child bone, and I'm going to use the red square here to move it back to sit roughly where the jaw pivot should go. And I'm going to rotate it with the red circle and scale it back with the purple circle. So that's that bit done. Next is to do the tail. So I'm going to choose the hips again, and I'm going to make another child joint, which will go over here, but I'm going to use the red translate square to move it back to the hips. I'm going to use the red circle to rotate it so that it's pointing backwards. And I'm going to make it a bit smaller with the purple handle. So that's kind of the start of it. And I'll make a child bone of that and rotate that to point down the tail, make it a bit smaller. Another child, rotate, a bit smaller, child, you know the drill, rotate, make it a bit smaller, and the last one, and rotate like that. So that's the tail kind of done. Let's do the legs. So I'm going to make another child of this spine by clicking new child. And this time I'm going to use the blue square here, and I'm going to move it to roughly where the start of the leg should be. So I'm going to move it a bit lower now using the red square. And now I'm going to rotate it. So I'm going to rotate it using the blue handle to point that way. Then look from this view, use the red circle to rotate it down, use the purple circle to scale it back. Now look at it from a few different angles to see if it's lined up. Just come in this way a little bit, and I'll rotate it that way a touch. That is, I think, good enough. Make a child of this. So just make sure, yeah, that's aligned. Make a child of that. Rotate that to point back towards the ankle. Going to about there, roughly. Whoops. Get it lined this way. I'm going to use the outside yellow circles just so it rotates relative to the current view. And I'm going to scale it back with the purple handle. And then from here, I'm going to do a trick that I've borrowed from some Blender rigging, where I'm going to make two children of this joint. One for IK that we'll do later, and another for the foot itself. So I'll make a child of this, and I'm going to rotate it so that it sits backwards from the ankle, and I'll scale it back, just so it's sort of there, but it's not in the way. Then we're going to choose the shin bone again, and I'll make another child of that. And this is what I'll use for the foot. So rotate it this way, look from this angle, scale it back so it's sort of roughly where the toe goes. And that is probably good enough. Okay, now I'm going to grab this whole leg setup, and I'm going to mirror it across to the other leg. There is a bug at the moment where it seems to get confused by having these two child bones down here. So I'll have to recreate one of those later, but that's fine. So I'll choose this bone, and go clone, hierarchy across X, and hit clone. And ask me for the suffix, so I'll put this underscore R. There it is, and you can see that it has missed the foot bone. That's fine. So I'll choose this shin bone, make a child, bring up my rotation gizmo again, and I will rotate that in place. Let's just go roughly kind of there. Yep, and I'll scale it back. Okay, so that's the base skeleton done. Next thing we need to do is to attach the skin onto this skeleton. So for that, we're going to go up to the outliner, this button here, and I'm going to choose the mesh, which is at the top here, and I'll put a tick next to it. And then I can go back over to the skeleton, and I can choose the bind menu over here. And I'm going to go and choose auto weight. We'll think for a bit, and then we'll weight it. That's cool. So now I'll just test that by moving some of the joints. So the tail looks good. The head looks good. With the legs. Okay, so the legs aren't bad, but you can see that the claws on his hand have been incorrectly weighted. So we'll fix that quickly. So I'm going to go back to the bind pose by pressing this bind button down here, this one. Oops, sorry, not that one. I want the pose button down here, this last button here, pose. So that just resets it back to how it was when I bound the skin. And I'm going to choose the bone that these claws should belong to, which is the spine. And we're going to use this paint button, this paint tool here to fix the weights. So choose that, and I can see that that this claws have no weight, so I'll just quickly paint them in. 1, 2, 3, oops, missed a bit, and 4. Look at it from a different angle. Bit there. Okay, that seems to be correct. So I'm going to hit apply and then exit. So now if I move the legs, the claws stay where they should. So that's really good. Okay, so next is we set up the constraints. So we'll set up the spring constraints first because they're the most fun. So what we do is we go to the constraint menu over here. So this one here. And we have all these different constraint types across the top. I'm going to choose the spring constraint over here. So for this to work, all we do is we tell it which is the bone to start the spring from. So which is the first of the tail bones. So go to constraints and we say this is the base. We set some properties, so we'll make it a little bit stiffer. I've just played with these values. These seem to work for me. And we say how many children bones should also be made part of the spring. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 joints. So we'll do 5 and hit apply. And that's it. So now if I grab the hips and wiggle them, you can see the tail gets this lovely wiggle on it, which is really cool. So go back to the default pose and do the same for the head. So choose the head, constraint, we'll set that bone to be bone 2, set the chain length to be 2 because it's only the head and the jaw. We'll leave the same values for stiffness and drag force. So I'm going to hit apply. So again, if I grab the hips, you can see that it has that base motion. So that's pretty cool. Next is the legs. So I'm going back to the bind pose, and I'll set up IK. So for here, I'm going to go to the constraint menu again and go to the first option, which is for IK, and we tell it what is the end of the IK chain. So for this one, I'm going to choose this little bone out the back of the foot here, go to constraint and say that is the effector, and we're going to turn on these options to auto create the pole and link the pole to target. And when I hit apply, this makes me these two extra controls. So this control here at the knee determines which way the overall leg will try and sort of twist. So if I bring up its handle and move this out, you can see that as I move this around, the leg tries to aim towards that thing, which is handy. And this other controller down here will let me move the foot like that. But the other advantage is that if I don't move the foot and if I just move, say, the hips, you can see that the foot stays in place. So that's pretty cool. So I'll do the same for the other leg. So I'm going to go choose that back effector, constraint, this is the target, leave all the other options as they are, apply OK, oops. And that is almost done. But you can see that while this is pretty close, you can see that the feet tend to twist and rotate around strangely. And also, if I rotate these controllers, you can see that the feet kind of twist with it, but not really. They sort of like drift and do strange things. So what we can do is we can set up another constraint which will force the feet to rotate exactly with these IK handles. So that is a rotate constraint, which is this one here. So what we do is we simply say which is the thing to be copying rotation from, which is this IK target. So we go, that's my target. And then we say what is the thing that we want to copy the to follow that rotation, which is the foot. And we say, so here we've got, this is the target, this is what's going to be affected, and we hit apply. And now that will follow the rotation of the foot. So this is done a bit of a strange thing. Let's see if I can fix that up. So I'm just going to rotate the handle so that the foot is not twisted. There's still a few issues every now and then in terms of how the IK handles and stuff interact, but you can usually fix up pretty quickly. So I'm just going to move this so that it sits. Whoa, what are you doing? That should be like that. Facing forward. Cool. And we can adjust this handle as well directly by going to this default controller in the outliner and just correct it so that it sits the way we want it to sit. So that should be that. That's cool. Let's do the same for the other foot. So this is so under the rotation, this is the source. The foot will be the thing to be affected, and apply. This one seemed to behave, which is good. So now I can rotate this handle and the foot follows it much more closely. And the same with this guy. Rotate that and that all behaves. Cool. So that's the rig all set up. So now I can go to the hips and I can wiggle that, or I can rotate it. And that's what I did for most of my animation. In fact, what we can do now is we can record this. So I'm going to get myself sort of set up from here, and this record button down here, this will give me a countdown, and after the countdown starts, whatever I do on the rig will be recorded into keyframes. I'm going to press that button. If you need to cancel out of it, you can press it again before the timer, before the countdown runs out, and it gets cancelled, which is useful. So anyway, let's go record this. 3, 2, 1. And we're going to go over there, look over this way, go up and down to there and stop. So now if I play, you can see we've got all these keyframes, which is awesome. We now have a graph editor inside Morphin, which is pretty awesome. So if I press this button down here, this brings up the graph editor. And if I go to the rotation keys, you can see that's all there. That looks a bit messy, so I can turn off tangents. So that's all nicely editable, which is really, really cool. Anyway, last thing to do is to set this up for rendering. So to do that, we're going to hide the rig by going to the rig options up here and turn on hide all rigs. Let's set up a backdrop for this so it has a ground plane and something to cast shadows on. So I'm going to go back up to the new objects button over here and go backdrop. This is facing backwards, so I'll just turn it around, something like that. I'm going to drag it back to there. Cool. Next, we can add a spotlight. So I'm going to go to new objects, light. I'm going to choose this last one here, which is a spotlight. And I'm going to put that up above him and put it so that it's shining directly down on him. We have to increase the brightness on that. So I'm going to go to the outliner, go to the options here. I'm going to increase the intensity so that it's nice and bright. I'm going to reduce the angle so it's more of a focused spotlight like that. Turn up the edges to be a little bit soft. That's cool. Next thing, we can turn on shadows from this menu over here, which is the sort of like, I guess, backdrop and scene display options. So turn on shadows. This is still getting a lot of ambient light from the HDR, so I'm going to turn this intensity down to nothing. I don't like the green of the backdrop, so I'm going to go back to the backdrop, and this button here brings up its properties. So I go to that one, and I'm going to set this diffuse color to just be a gray, like that. Turn off the handle, and that is looking not too bad. I'll go back into the backdrop options, and I'm going to set the background color to black. So now we have a totally black background. Last thing we can do is we can use the post-processing to make it look a little bit more bright and vibrant. So go to this option here, for post-processing, go turn it on, and I've just got a little bit of a saturation boost, and I might turn the brightness up just a little bit like that. I think that looks pretty good. Let that play. I think it's not bad. So the last thing to do is we can export this. And another great feature in Morphin is we can export video directly. So if I go to the file menu, the first one, and go to export, and then export video, you get dropped into this mode. So I can hit play, and I can just turn this around. I can get this looking how I want it. And then when I'm ready, I can press record down here. That's now recording. I can even move the camera while this is recording. So I can be doing this kind of stuff. And then when I'm done, I can stop recording. Ask me where to save it to. Go save video. Now if I jump over to my photo reel, you can see I've got a video. So that's everything. Hopefully that was nice and clear. If you have any questions, come and join the Morphin Discord.